Welcome back, dear viewers. You're still watching The Breakfast Show live on Nile TV International, and it's now time for our first topic of discussion for today, and we're going to be talking about the climate summit that was attended by President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi as the President of Egypt and also presiding over the African Union. And the President has called on the developed world to shoulder its responsibilities regarding climate change and committing to the proposed limits on greenhouse emissions. And to shed more light on this topic, we're most delighted to be joined here in the studio by Dr. Wafi Nusseir, and he's a member of the World Congress for the Environment. First of all, Doctor, good morning, and thank you so much for joining us on The Breakfast Show.
Good morning, and God protect Egypt.
Good morning, Dr. Wafi. Dr. Wafi, to start with, how do you see the importance of holding such a meeting to try to look at the effects and to counter the negative impacts of the climate change and the greenhouse emissions?
This summit is to create ambitions and to boost acceleration for the climate summit that was held in Paris 2015. It's just a step for a greater deal that it will be on 2020 for the environment as a total, not just the climate change. So what is happening now is just to discuss the climate change as a major issue for the environment, but furthermore it will be another deal, big deal, that is expected, and the World Congress for the Environment is preparing for it.
Doctor, also, how can such summits provide the adequate financing for the developing nations and those nations that are suffering from the climate change in order to mitigate the negative effect of climate change and also, of course, global warming on the developing nations?
Yes, as I have mentioned, these issues and for the financing was addressed in the 2015 Paris Agreement. Nowadays, we are not expecting new deals, but just to implement what we have agreed about before. But we have seen just one item for the rainforests, especially for the Amazon. They have raised about $500 million yesterday to start protecting rainforests, not just the Amazon, but also African forests and Siberia forests. Those are the three major lungs for the air, for the earth. Provide us with oxygen. Amazon in itself provides the earth with about 20% of the oxygen needed, and the others are providing the rest.
Yes. Dr. Wafi, to what extent the modern technology could help in our fight against the repercussions of the global warming and the climate change?
All the time we are discovering new things. But so far, it's not a problem of the technology. It's a problem of people who are the decision makers, the politicians, the people who decide what should be done. We have seen a new thing for this summit, that the Secretary of the UN invited the youth to be in this summit before the meeting of the presidents. So we have seen for 2 days, Saturday and Sunday, a youth meeting. And in this youth meeting, the youth have expressed themselves, not just in the meeting, but demonstrations all over the world. We have seen demonstrations in USA, in all the capitals of the world, started off Sydney in Australia, London in UK, all Stockholm, all the cities were youth demonstrations.
Allow me, Doctor, if we have to mention these protests, we have to, of course, give the credit to Greta from Sweden that ignited these protests, and one day she was protesting alone this climate change. The Swedish girl that was
Yes, yes. This one, she said a very important statement. How dare you? So this statement was all over the newspapers, telling the decision makers,
Yep.
you are corrupting our futures. How dare you? And this was very important, addressing
Yes.
what's happening.
Also speaking, Doctor, about the UN and its role in supporting the developing countries in fighting climate change and the negative repercussions of the climate change on the developing countries.
Well, actually, in my opinion, if you want to ask about my personal opinion, I find the UN is still weak in deciding what should be done with for our plan. That's why we have another organization that I am a member in it, that it started to take over and to push forward for what should be done, the World Congress. So we are trying to implement what should be done, and this can be addressed in many other issues.
Yes. Dr. Nusser, of course, the African continent is not responsible to a great extent on the gas emissions, yet it is one of the most affected continents by the climate change. So what more could be done here in order to protect Africa, as Egypt is heading the African Union, from the repercussions, the negative repercussions of these gas emissions and, of course, the climate change, which is affecting many countries in Africa to a great extent?
Yes, Africa should play a very major role. And I have mentioned earlier that the African forest is very important as an aid to the Earth's lungs.
Yeah.
So what is happening now is the World Congress has initiated, and it is now implemented, what is called the Great Green Wall. The Great Green Wall will be from west to east Africa, and it will be 7,000 kilometers, 16 kilometers wide. So this will add to the forests there. It will enhance the air quality, and of course provide the earth with oxygen. Moreover, of course, we should be turning to the green energy. And Egypt was leading in this matter by the biggest solar energy plant that it will be in Aswan.
Yeah, in Bimban.
Bimban. So this should be followed for all the African countries, as well as we should enhance the water quality and the desertifications, because the desert is going to be accidented with the lack of rain in some areas. Immigrations is expected also for some countries to find better places to live. So there should be a lot of things could be done in Africa in these matters.
Yeah. Also, speaking or shedding more light on Egypt, Doctor. Aside from this solar power plant that is being established in Aswan, what are the efforts that are being done by Egypt in order to have or to be more dependent on clean and renewable sources of energy rather than other sources that can cause greenhouse emissions and can have a negative impact on the climate?
Yeah, we have, of course, the wind energy, and there are a lot of inventions that didn't put in light yet, but Egypt has a very important challenge is the water. Nowadays we have the dam in Asubia Dam that is not, it's vague until now, and we don't know what is going to be happening. So we have to concentrate on protecting and preserving the water we have. And of course, agriculture extending in the green land will be depending on this water. So there are a lot of challenges, and a lot of energy also can be provided. Green energy can be provided. We have seen also nowadays in the parliament that they are trying to establish a new law for providing preventing plastic bags. This is a very important issue globally.
Yeah.
So to cope with this issue is very important for Egypt.
Yes. Sir, from your point of view, what are the main challenges here facing the developing countries in facing the repercussions of the climate change and the greenhouse emissions, and how to overcome these challenges?
Actually, Egypt is affected by the issues of or the negative impacts of the global warming, but it is not affecting it. So we, in this summit of the climate change, we are expecting aid, financial from the rich countries or the first world countries,
Yes,
to provide us with the money to try to cope with the negative impacts.
yes,
An example for that is the rise of the sea in the beaches we have seen in Alexandria. We have to make very important protections for the sea, which will cost millions. Who's paying for these projects? So we have to ask for aid from the rich companies.
yes.
Also, Doctor, during the Paris Climate Pact, in its recommendations, it had pledged $100 million worth of aid to developing countries so that they can face the climate change impacts. In your opinion, or as a close observer and an expert, have the developed countries been committed to this pledge, or you don't see that?
I didn't see that, because as I mentioned earlier, in Paris agreement, this was issued, but it was not implemented because USA withdrew of the agreement, and followed by China, followed by Russia, and the agreement was collapsing. So we are expecting in the 2020 deal, which will cover the environment in general, and the climate change will be part of it.
So do you think that the world's powers, the superpowers, will be back in this pact, or they will remain stagnant?
Well, this is a very important issue, and a question that worth a lot of money, because what is happening now in USA, for example, there is an election will happen in 2020. So in 2020, there is Bernie Sanders, for example, one of the electors, has come up with his election plan to be Green New Deal. So this in front of Trump will be an important issue. So if the people have not, or let me say not the people, but the governments have not adhered to these recommendations from the people, then there will be a lot of changes happening in 2020. And we have seen the demonstrations, and we have seen the youth. And let me repeat again the very important statement, how dare you?
Yes. Sir, of course, attending the 74th meetings of the General Assembly, President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi on the sidelines of that in New York, attended, of course, the climate summit, which is convening in New York, and he delivered a speech on behalf of Africa, as Egypt is sharing the African Union. How do you see the most important points tackled by the President in his speech, and how actually we can find a solution for Africa regarding that issue during that meeting?
Well, it was a very important speech, of course, as usual, and it addressed all the items needed, and especially health, because Africa is suffering of health matters. So the President have addressed all these issues, and as what he also demanded is the expectations from the rich country to support us, to give us the money to adopt, not just for Egypt, but nowadays for all of Africa as a president of the African Union.
Indeed, sir.
Also, Dr. Nusir, speaking about the President's comments, if you can tell us, how do you read his statements that were made, the most important statements that were made during the climate summit?
Well, he concentrated on the health. And of course, he have shown Egypt efforts in eliminating the virus C, and the 100 million
healthy lives. The 100 million Healthy Lives Initiative.
Healthy Life Initiative. And of course, he spoke also about African health, and Africa suffers from many other diseases like AIDS and Ebola, and these issues is also an indirect impact of the environment.
Yes, indeed.
So it was properly addressed in the climate change summit to draw attention that we need support not just for Egypt but for all Africa, and you are the cause for these issues.
Yes, indeed. Dr. Wafi, of course, Egypt is playing a very important role now and doing great efforts in order to face the challenges of the climate change. And one of these efforts in order to face that is trying to reduce the emissions and to reduce the pollution by, as we have talked about that issue before, the President's initiative of using a bike or a bike for every citizen. How that could be implemented and how that could actually be of great help, because we have seen that example and that model implemented in most of the world countries, especially the Western countries.
What model?
Using bikes and the
bikes, yeah,
bike for every citizen.
Yeah, well, I was invited in your
yes, and we talked about that.
Yeah, great program, but of course I am with the bikes.
Yes.
And wherever I travel, they provide me as a member of the World Congress with cars, but I park the car and use it when it's needed, but most of the time I use the bikes all over the world. So in all of my offices, even in Egypt, I have a bike. I'm with the bike 100%, but on the other side,
We should do some preparations. in
we
order,
have to
of course,
prepare the streets for that.
to have
Otherwise,
lanes,
it will be a mess.
of course.
Okay, it's not just to provide, like the initiative that was saying, provide each citizen with a bike. Yes, I appreciate that, but how they will ride it in the streets?
We have to have a lane for bikes.
A lane, special light traffics, and of course there are a lot of preparation has to be done first.
As we're wrapping up, Dr. Nusseir, your final comments, please, and wrap up recommendations for the topic that we have tackled.
The summit so far was successful in the climate change, and for the first time, as I mentioned, the youth have played an important role and to address the governments. Egypt on the way to cope with the environmental negative impacts, and I wish this will lead to the 2020 environmental agreement, that the climate change will be part of it.
Hopefully. Sir, of course, regarding the climate change and the challenges facing Africa from the gas emissions, to wrap up, what are your recommendations here and the tips that you can give us regarding that issue and how to face that issue in Africa, not only in Egypt?
What was the issue?
The issue
gas?
of, yes, the greenhouse emissions and the climate change. What efforts could be done in Africa in order to face that?
Of course. The green energy implemented, very important to start implemented. We need at least 20% of green energy in the coming decade. So at least my hope is to have 100% in future. But this will take a lot of time because we cannot withdraw from fossil fuel suddenly. We are in an essential needs for the fossil fuel nowadays. But this should be done. The green energy is the future for our planet.
Indeed. Dr. Wafi Nusseir, member of the World Congress for the Environment, thank you very much, sir, for being our guest for today.
Thank you very much, and God help Egypt are protected, and we wish to be in a better environment all the time.
Thank you very much.
And dear viewers, now we move on to a short break, and then we'll be back to resume the remaining segments of The Breakfast Show live on Nile TV International.